Well, the North West Shelf is basically the foundation of Australia's LNG or gas export industry. It was built in the early 1980s and it very much underwrote the domestic gas market and the expansion of gas-fired industry in Western Australia ever since. I think at one stage, certainly, and for a big part of its early life, it accounted for something like 20% or even a bit more of the global LNG industry and 1% of Australia's economy as well. So it's a huge plant. The thing is that the North West Shelf's gas fields have been depleting and its operating licence besides was due to expire in 2030. So what the federal government has effectively done is extend it 40 years, pave the way for it to operate for much longer. And in doing that, you can really read that it is trying to give a chance to the giant Browse gas development off the Kimberley coast of Western Australia. Woodside, which controls that project, wants to pipe the gas south to the North West Shelf to bring that project into life because it's been elusive for about 50 years.
What's its role in the resources industry overall, and do we know where the gas goes? Because I think a lot of Australians will be waking up thinking, does this go overseas? Is it for our domestic market?
Yeah, it's a combination of both. Certainly a lot of the gas that would be put through the North West Shelf in an extended lifetime of that facility would go overseas. That's why it was built as an export facility effectively. But it would also provide gas for the West Australian economy, and the West Australian economy is very dependent on gas still, arguably to a much more significant extent than all of the eastern states. I think the domestic demand for gas in Western Australia now is greater even than the eastern states combined. That never used to be the case, but it is now. And gas is really used for much of the mineral processing in WA and mining, and it's also a very important fuel for electricity, much more important than the eastern states generally speaking. So it would be for both of those reasons.
What about the impact on climate change and net zero? There are many environment groups, we understand, just completely flabbergasted by this decision this morning. Indeed, and I think, look, on environmental grounds, there is going to be an almighty push against this extension, and Browse in particular. Look, Browse is a huge project. It contains an enormous amount of gas, enough gas to supply all of Australia's, the equivalent of all of Australia's domestic need for the better part of 20 years. Of course, most of it will go offshore. It is a very high gas content field in any case. And that's not even including the emissions that would be caused by the use of that gas overseas or domestically by industry. So on emissions, it's going to be a huge fight. And then there are all of the other environmental issues associated with it, Scott Reef, for example, and just generally development environmental costs anyway. There are also cultural concerns, very strong cultural concerns from traditional owners in the group. I mean, this is right off the precipice of some of the most precious rock art in the world. What has the Minister said about the protections in place for that nearby ancient rock art? Well, interestingly, Bridget, the Minister has said that central to his decision is a raft of stringent conditions, I think in his words, around the rock art and protection of the rock art. But he hasn't said what they are and has given Woodside and the project proponents or operators 10 business days to respond to those proposed conditions. So we don't know quite what they are, but I think what we could probably safely assume at this stage is that there will absolutely be an obligation to monitor much more closely the effects of pollution and emissions on that rock art and whether or the extent to which it degrades that rock art. And I think perhaps there will be a real push on by regulators and the government to try to stop so much gas being used as essentially an input, being used to, help with the LNG process and other industrial processes on the Burrup Peninsula to maybe clean up the industry on that peninsula as much as possible.